Thank you guys for coming to our third event in our Resistance and Resilience Speaker Series. I also want to thank our sponsors, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, for sponsoring this event and making it possible for this to happen. I also want to thank our hosts, the New Mexico Veterans Memorial, for hosting us. Today we have a very special program for you guys. We have a performance by Nikki Lewis, who was a survivor of Japanese incarceration during the Second World War, as well as the New Mexico Japanese American Citizens League. They will be doing a performance called Confinement in the Land of Enchantment. So we'll have that performance. After that's over, we'll do a 10-minute break. And during that time, use the restroom. I also encourage you to visit the exhibit in the back that the JACL kindly brought and put up for us today. We also have refreshments in the back. If you have a major way back there, we also have a table. If you want to support the museum and make it possible for us to do these in the future, we really appreciate that. So without further ado, let's get started. Thank you.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
The order came in 42 from the president, and they told us to take only what you can carry, labeled with our name tag stamps. They shipped us to internment camps, like cattle herded in stalls. The rooms had barely any walls. Up and down the western states, they took our land and sealed our fates. Our homes and orchards left behind, like the Constitution, oh but never mind. Swept away like a dusty breeze, no crime or trial if you're Japanese. Surrounded by barbed wire fence for 2+ years, and ever since I hear them say, take only what you can carry. The order came in 42 from the president, and they told us to take only what you can carry. Take only what you can carry. Take only what you can carry.
The first generation of Japanese living in the United States is called
Issei.
Days of spacious dreams, I sailed for America, overblown with hope, overblown with
Hope! We left Japan seeking adventure.
And fortune.
We headed for America.
America. In America, doras grow on trees. You just reach out and pick them.
America, in America, the talk is all of gold. The gold rush and gold mountain and golden fields of grain.
America. America, my dreams are golden too.
But our American dream soon turned to American nightmare. Immediately after the attack on Pearl Harbor, 7,500 Issei men were rounded up and held without just cause or due process.
We are businessmen, shopkeepers, greengrocers, fishermen.
Buddhist priests, Christian ministers, and community leaders.
We are fathers of American children.
the young men who had immigrated to America so many years earlier were now in a deadly conundrum. They had lived here for decades as resident aliens.
And now we are enemy aliens.
During World War II, all Americans of Japanese descent living on the West Coast were removed from their homes and put into prison camps.
Executive Order number 9066 deprived them of their rights, although they never had been accused of any crime. 125,000 Japanese Americans. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
I'm named after Shirley Temple. On December 7th, 1941, hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii, the FBI entered our home in Seattle, Washington, and removed my father in the presence of my mother.
Shoichi!
Daddy.
Shoichi Nojima was interrogated at Fort Missoula, Montana, transferred to Fort Lincoln, Bismarck, North Dakota, and held in prison camps in Lordsburg and Santa Fe, New Mexico from 1942 to 1946.
We never lived together as a family again. And in the days following the attack on Pearl Harbor, there were curfews and unannounced searches at all hours for contraband weapons, radios, and cameras. Many people destroyed whatever identified them with Japan, including photographs and books and treasured heirlooms.
My father went to his bedroom dresser where he kept 2 samurai swords, family treasures which had been handed down to him. Our ancestors were samurai warriors, and I look forward to owning these swords one day. He took the swords out of their inlaid cases and took them to the backyard where we dug a hole. He thrusted those blades into the ground, and then we buried them.
In my Tonka poetry, I have expressed my deepest emotions. In brief lines, I could state what might otherwise require many volumes. Composed in my head as I worked in the fields by day, and written down late at night by candlelight in my bed while others slept. My Tonka poetry was a kind of journal for me, a way of expressing my innermost thoughts and feelings as I became a part of America. When the war broke out, I feared that my words would be twisted to harm my family. And for this reason, I gathered my poetry manuscripts. I brought them to the field behind our farmhouse, and I burned them. The poetic record of my early life in America went up in flames.
Gene Wakowski Houston's father was a fishing boat owner on Terminal Island. In her memoir, Farewell to Manzanar, Jean recounts her father's response to December 7th, 1941.
On the night Papa heard about Pearl Harbor, he burned the Japanese flag he had brought with him from Hiroshima 35 years earlier. It was such a beautiful piece of material, I couldn't believe he was doing it. He burned papers too, and documents, anything that would connect him with Japan. But those precautions didn't do him any good. He was not only an alien, but after 35 years, he was still not allowed to become an American citizen. Yet he held a commercial fishing boat license. The FBI were picking up such men for fear they were making contact with enemy ships along the California coast. They took Papa to Fort Lincoln, an alien internment camp in Bismarck, North Dakota, where he was interrogated.
What is your name?
Wakatsuki Ko,
Place of birth?
Kake, a small town in Hiroshima on the island of Honshu.
What schools did you attend?
4 years in Chuogako, school for training military officers.
Why did you leave?
The marching. I got tired of the marching. It's not something I wanted to do.
Have you had any relatives serving in the Japanese military now or in the past?
My uncle was a general, a rather famous general. He led the regiment which defeated the Russians at Port Arthur in 1905.
Have you ever been in contact with them since coming to the United States?
No, I have not been in contact with anyone in Japan.
Why not?
I'm what you call the black sheep of the family.
So you've never returned to your homeland?
No,
Because you're the black sheep?
because I have 10 children. I've never been able to afford the trip.
What are their names?
How can I remember that many names?
Try.
William is the oldest, then Eleanor, Woodrow, Francis, Lillian, Regiro, Martha, Keo, and Mary.
That's only 9.
9?
You said there were 10.
I told you it's too many to remember.
It says here that you're being charged with delivering oil to Japanese submarines off the coast of California.
That's not true.
There are several sightings of them there.
If I had seen one, I would have laughed.
Why?
Only a very foolish submarine commander would take a vessel that far away from his home fleet.
What do you think about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
I am sad for both countries. It is the kind of thing that always happens when military men are in control.
What do you think about the American military? Would you object to your sons serving?
Yes, I would protest it. The American military is just like the Japanese.
What do you mean?
They also want to make war when it is not necessary. As long as military men are in control of the country, you're always going to have war.
Who do you think is going to win this one?
America, of course. It is richer, has more resources, more weapons, more people. The Japanese are courageous fighters, and they will fight well. But their leaders are stupid. Every night I weep for my country.
You say Japan is still your country.
I was born there. I have relatives living there. In many ways, yes, it is still my country.
Do you feel any loyalty to Japan or its emperor? I said, do you feel any...
How old are you?
29.
When were you born?
I'm the interrogator here, Mr. Wygotsky, not you.
I'm interested to know when you were born.
1913.
Ah, I have been living in this country 9 years longer than you have. Do you realize that? Yet I am prevented from becoming a citizen. I am prevented by law from owning land, and now I am separated from my family without just cause.
Those matters are outside of my hands, Mr. Wygotsky.
Well, whose hands are they in?
I don't like North Dakota any more than you do. The quicker we get these questions done, the sooner we both get to go.
And where will you go when you leave?
Who do you want to win the war?
I am interested to know where you will be going when you leave.
Mr. Wygotsky, if I have to repeat each of these questions, we're going to be here forever. I repeat, who do you want to win the war?
When your mother and father are having a fight, do you want them to kill each other? Or do you just want them to stop fighting?
Many of these families never knew where their men were taken. Mail was forbidden.
After a couple of months, it was okay to send letters, but they were heavily censored. Parts were cut out, sometimes whole paragraphs.
When I finally got my husband's letters from Bismarck, they looked like Swiss cheese.
In February 1942, we were loaded on a train at the Union Station in Los Angeles. Approximately 50 prisoners in 20 cars. 2 soldiers at the front and rear with rifle and bayonet.
We didn't know where we're going. The windows were blacked out.
We ended up in the middle of winter in Bismarck, North Dakota. We're from Southern California, you know. Bismarck was like stepping into a refrigerator plant. 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Barbed wire and icicles.
On February 19, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066.
On March 18, 1942, the U.S. government created the War Relocation Authority, a civilian agency that supervised the creation of 10 incarceration camps to hold the women, children, and men of Japanese ancestry removed from the West Coast.
Hey! 2/3 of us are American citizens.
We were given 48 hours to clear out. We had already left most of our possessions behind, but Mama brought along her pottery, her silver, her tea sets, heirlooms like Granny's kimono from Japan, and one fine old set of china, blue and white porcelain, almost translucent. On the day we were leaving, our car was crammed with so many boxes and luggage and kids. We just had no more room. Mama had to sell her china. Secondhand dealers had been prowling the neighborhood. I'll give you $15 for that china, but is full setting for 12 and worth at least 200. 15's my top price. Mama started to quiver. She had been packing all night and trying to calm down Granny, who couldn't understand why we were moving and what the rush was about. Mama's nerves were shot. She didn't say another word. She just glared at the man. The dealer said, "Well, I can't give you more than $17.50 for that china." Mama walked over to the red velvet case and took out a dinner plate. She smashed it on the floor in front of that man's feet. And the dealer said, hey, don't do that. Those are valuable dishes. Mama took another dish out and hurled it at the floor. And another, never moving never opening her mouth, just glaring at the man as he retreated out the door.
By November 1942, the move to 10 permanent camps was complete.
Manzanar, California.
Tule Lake, California.
Grenada, Colorado.
Poston, Arizona.
Minidoka, Idaho.
Gila River, Arizona.
Heart Mountain, Wyoming.
Topaz, Utah.
Roar, Arkansas.
Jerome, Arkansas.
And while their families were moved to these 10 war relocation camps that were spread across the West and the Southwest and 2 in Arkansas, many of the Issei men, like my dad, who had been held in freezing climes of North Dakota, were transported to Lordsburg in the hot and desolate boot heel of southern New Mexico.
Between 1942 and 1943, Lordsburg imprisoned a total of 1,500 Issei men. Most had lived in this country a number of years and had fathered American-born children. Their average age was 55.
We are Issei from many regions in the U.S. and territories of Hawaii and Alaska. I'm sure our endurance in living through harsh conditions of prison camp were because of the comfort and friendships of each other.
At 1:45 a.m. on July 27, 1943, a train from Bismarck, North Dakota arrived at Elmora, citing the railroad stop that was 3.5 miles from the town of Lordsburg.
We were met by armed American soldiers.
We're handing over 147 internees, including 2 who are sick.
We got off the train and stood in rows surrounded by the guards.
You 2, step out and wait. A car will take you to the camp.
One man looked frail. The other had a pronounced limp.
The sergeant ordered the rest of us to march. The full moon was bright in the night sky. Everything on the prairie was quiet, as if sleeping eternally. We walked with our heads down, without even drawing a breath. The guards surrounded us, kept the same formation, and we all proceeded along in longitudinal rows. The moonlight cast a dim light on the railroad tracks.
We marched for 15 or 16 minutes and realized that no vehicle had come to the camp to get the sick men. We kept looking back, noting the distance between the camp and our starting point.
Why hadn't they arranged to meet these sick men before the train arrived? Are they still standing by the tracks, waiting for a vehicle to pick them up?
We reached the camp at 3 a.m. Then a roll call was taken by the second lieutenant. 145 of us, minus the 2 men.
Soon after dawn, a story started that the men who had been separated had tried to escape and were shot to death by a soldier.
We were stunned to hear the rumor because Mr. Kobata had been suffering from lung illness. He had to be in the hospital in Bismarck. He had to be transported on the train by a stretcher.
And Mr. Isamura had damaged his spine when he fell from a fishing boat 10 years earlier. He had difficulty walking, could only walk 4 or 5 feet, then had to stop. With such physical handicaps, how could they have tried to escape? People began talking.
I heard 2 gunshots during roll call last night.
I heard 3 gunshots.
My dream was shattered by gunshots.
We vowed to learn the truth because we are fellow Japanese and we help each other during the 6 months of confinement in Bismarck. 32 of us rushed to the dispensary. We learned that Mr. Isamura died instantly at the scene, but Mr. Kawada had died in the infirmary at 5 a.m. They were only 57 or 58 years old.
Mrs. Brown, did you hear? The soldier who did the shooting, Private First Class Clarence Burleson, he was acquitted after testifying that he was following military protocol.
Oh my word, they say he's so popular in Lordsburg, he never has to pay for a meal in a cafe or a beer in the tavern.
I swore it would not devour me.
I swore it would not humble me.
I swore it would not break me.
In 1943, Lordsburg became a POW camp for Italian and German soldiers captured in Europe.
The infusion of German and Italian enemy soldiers into Lordsburg camp led to the belief, still held by many today, that the Issei men once held there were enemy soldiers captured in Japan.
Late in 1943, the Issei prisoners were transported from Lordsburg to Santa Fe internment camp, which was operated by the Department of Justice. This camp was located 2.5 miles from Santa Fe's downtown plaza. It is an area which is now called the Casa Solana neighborhood.
I grew up in the Casa Solana neighborhood, and I think I remember the presence of a camp, but I don't really remember anything else.
Man, we passed by the barbed wire with curiosity or disdain.
I was 8 years old when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. The next summer, when I was playing with a group of kids near the train station, some Japanese men were being transported to the internment camp. When the train pulled into the station, they threw candy bars to us. And that time, candy bars were hard to come by, and we sure looked forward to their generous gifts. When we were in the area that's now called Casa Solana, we'd walk near the camp and see all the guards and fences and people inside. But if it weren't for the candy, I might not remember any of it. Lucia Ortiz Trujillo, Santa Fe.
Anti-Japanese attitudes and stereotypes circulating in New Mexico were often found in the official papers of the governor, John Miles, like this one, simply signed Lloyd.
You should oppose with all the vim and vigor you possess the entrance of any Jap born in either Japan or the USA into the state of New Mexico. Either temporary or permanent, all Japs are skunks no matter where a man or a skunk is born, under the same stars or same flags. He is still a skunk, same stripes, same characteristics, same odor. Lloyd.
What I remember are the barracks with black tar paper and high fences, the guard towers. Kermit Hill, retired history teacher, Santa Fe.
Kermit and David Mason have known each other since first grade in Santa Fe. David is a retired Navy and commercial airline pilot now, but you have memories of that camp that go way, way back.
Way back when I was 3 years old, I was riding a buckskin named Queen. I remember the towers and the barbed wire on top. There was no doubt in my mind those men were our enemies. And once I got off my horse, I picked up a cactus on a stick and chucked it across the fence, trying to hit one of those Japs, the enemy. Even as a 3-year-old, I thought I could do my part for the war. David Mason, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
David's my brother. When we were kids, we'd listen to the news on the radio and watch newsreels of the Japanese fighting in the Pacific. And we lived close by that camp. I soon became plagued by fears of the Japanese and the camp nearby, especially at night. Like, what if they got out? What if they came after us? Sharon Mason, Santa Fe.
A few years ago, I found a letter from my mother, Zayla Hill, to my father who's overseas in Europe.
Gosh, the Japs are taking us in. And the two Axis powers, too. The old CCC camp is being prepared for a bunch of Japs. The whole town is in an uproar about it. But I suppose there's nothing that can be done about it.
But the tension and fear went both ways. The internees petitioned Lloyd H. Jensen, the camp commander, to raise the barbed wire fence surrounding the camp.
Santa Fe residents might storm our camp.
Santa Fe people are angry at reports of American casualties in the Pacific.
We fear Santa Fe people will storm the camp like last year.
Please raise the barbed wire fence.
Build it higher, please.
This painting by Santa Fe Camp by artist Jerry West graces the cover of our Clo book, Confinement in the Land of Enchantment. Jerry is the son of the Depression-era WPA artist Hal West, who was a guard at the Santa Fe camp and often made many sketches of the men and the guards.
Our dad worked the night shift. I have fine memories of the smell of coffee at 3 a.m., the muffled voices of my parents, the sound of the old 38 Chevy Coupe grinding up to a start on a cold morning, the motor roaring and sputtering and finally fading over the prairie. Like many Santa Fans, Dad was impressed by the ability of these men to garden. They grew vegetables that we northern New Mexicans had never seen. We were amazed at what they produced in this arid land. He was impressed by their quiet and peaceful manner, their industriousness.
My dad, Shoichi Nojima, was one of those gentle Issei incarcerated in Santa Fe camp. Now, I have learned from Jerry West about his dad, Hal, and also from the son of border guard, Augustine Tinney Grace, who used to take some of the Issei men hunting for rabbits with guns. And then there was Reverend Charles Kinsolving, who would often visit the camp.
That's right. My dad would conduct services for the Episcopalians and even evening prayers for anyone who wanted them. I remember he had death threats. The phone would ring and he'd say,
Another damn phone call.
and Mom would say,
Oh no.
but he'd just hang up. He wouldn't argue with anybody. Feelings were very high in Santa Fe because many men died or even survived the Baton Death March were from Santa Fe. So people who try to help the Japanese were not looked on very kind way. John Kinsolving, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
And then there was former Santa Fe Mayor Joe Valdez, who, when he was 13 years old in 1943, did odd jobs at Cash and Carry Grocery on Palace Avenue.
I remember guards from the camp bringing 3, 4 times 6, maybe interns to the store to choose from things we had in the store.
The guards were kind. They allowed us to walk around on our own.
A kind of mutual respect, no strong arming. We had freedom going to the store and picking out things, letting us buy what we wanted for ourselves.
Remember the little boy who threw the cactus over the barbed wire fence? Well, David's story takes an interesting twist many, many years later.
It took almost 50 years before I had the opportunity to apologize for my childhood bigotry. I was a pilot with a major airline and had an overnight in Bakersfield. When we arrived at our layover hotel, the staff was setting up for a reunion of the survivors and descendants of the Japanese internment camp Manzanar. With difficulty and regret, I searched out and I apologized to as many of the reunion attendees as I could for my part in this shameful chapter of our country's history.
The second generation of Japanese Americans is called
Nisei. Over 30,000 Nisei men served in all Japanese units of the United States military during World War II.
Many volunteered straight out of the WRA camps where their families remained.
All of us can't stay in the camps until the war is over. Some of us have to go to the front. Our records on the battlefield will determine when you return and how you'll be treated. And I don't know if I'm going to make it back.
That was Technical Sergeant Abraham Ohama, Company F, Combat Team. He was killed in action on October 20th, 1944.
Tadami Isusu had volunteered for the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and had completed basic training in Mississippi.
On my first furlough, I visited my father in Santa Fe, New Mexico. There were no buses from the train station. I looked around for a taxi.
Where to, soldier?
Hey, the driver took me to camp, and I pulled up to the gate.
Hey, how come you've got somebody in there and you're wearing that uniform?
In some cases, there were 2 sons. In a few cases, 3 or 4 sons serving in the military while their fathers were incarcerated. And you know, a lot of those boys didn't make it back.
The 442nd Regimental Combat Team and the 100th Battalion became the most highly decorated units in U.S. military history, with one of the highest casualty rates of the war.
We felt we had to prove our loyalty. And we did it. In blood.
While more than 125,000 persons of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast were living behind barbed wire and under gun towers, Japanese Americans inland were free of incarceration.
The history of Japanese Americans in New Mexico is unique. By 1900, the U.S. Census counted only 8 Japanese in the state. By 1910, coal mining and railroad jobs swelled their ranks to a whopping 250 souls.
The Japanese labor force was a bachelor community until the picture bride system brought Japanese women to America.
I'm Evelyn Saeda Tagami.
And I'm Mary Saeda Matsubara.
We were born in Albuquerque.
A long time ago.
Our mother was a picture bride.
Oh, let's tell the story.
Oh, let's.
Her family in Japan sent her picture to a young bachelor in America.
They exchanged photographs and they were married.
And when she landed in America, there were some young ladies who were looking over the railing of the ship, saying, "Oh, there's a man waiting down there below."
One of the brides said, I think that one's mine.
But then she looked again and she says, "Oh no, he's too ugly."
But our dad was handsome.
So our mom was lucky.
And so were we.
Although New Mexico passed an alien land law, we had a reputation for diversity and tolerance.
The way we were treated sometimes depended on where we lived.
Tazue Yamamoto was 15 when her family moved to Albuquerque from Arizona.
My father was farming, but had to give it up because white farmers were flooding his fields and bombing Japanese homes.
There was a large Japanese American community in Arizona, but the prejudice was severe.
We weren't allowed to use the public pool. They only let you if you went the day before the water was changed.
But in New Mexico, we never felt hardship for being Japanese.
When my children were growing up in Albuquerque, my husband, Taro, asked them,
Has anyone bothered you?
No, Dad.
but our son said,
Yeah, one boy.
What did you do about it?
Nothing.
we both jumped on him.
You didn't do anything?
Nothing?
Yeah, because my friends beat him up.
And that's how things were in New Mexico, in Albuquerque.
In my mother's generation, the Japanese American community in Albuquerque was very cohesive, very vibrant, very close to one another. Everyone was so excited about retaining their cultural history. And you know, growing up with all the cousins down on 4th Street, I grew up thinking that if you were Japanese, we're all related. Keiko Octagawa, Albuquerque.
In 1942, the town of Clovis took it upon itself to remove its Japanese American residents. Clovis's Japtown was home to 18 Issei adults and 17 American-born children. The fathers worked as skilled mechanics for the Santa Fe Railroad.
I remember on Monday, December 8th, after Pearl Harbor, my dad left work carrying his lunchbox, but he came home before noon. He never went back to work again. Roy Vihata, Oberlin, Ohio.
In the first month of the war, the community was held under house arrest. On the evening of January 24th, 1942, vigilantes began streaming across the railroad tracks, carrying torches and guns.
The Border Patrolmen came and ordered our parents to take whatever we can, and they began throwing everything into pillowcases and tossing them into patrol cars. I remember just crying all night long. I was only 8.
I woke up and there was a bayonet poking me through a blanket and a man yelling at me to get going. Fred Kimura, Portland, Oregon.
Well, the policemen, they killed my dog. They shot her dead. She was barking. She's dead.
I was 11. I never got to ride that red bicycle that Mom got me for Christmas. Lily Kiyohara, Portland, Oregon.
They drove us 150 miles away to the other side of the state. When I woke up, I saw mountains for the first time in my life.
Mom told me that place was called Old Raton Ranch. She said that it's up in the Lincoln National Forest. It was an old abandoned CCC camp from the Depression days.
We were there for almost a year. Then we were sent to Poston Camp, Arizona.
Our family went to Camp Topaz in the high desert of Utah, but the memory of that last night in Clovis, I won't forget forever.
In 2014, 71 years later, after Roy, Fred, and Lily were removed from their hometown, they were flown to Clovis.
We were greeted with a giant welcome home sign, and were honorary grand marshals in the Pioneers' Day Parade.
At a ceremony in the local church, we were given the keys to the city and an apology.
It was very emotional.
Mayor David Lansford, who had led the effort to locate these survivors of Clovis Japanese American community, has said,
We have to remember our history and the injustices of history. We have to reconcile what happened. If we don't reconcile the past, it will leave a scar that will never heal.
With us were our families and members of the New Mexico Japanese American Citizens League from Albuquerque.
It was the largest Japanese American presence in Clovis since 1942.
Welcome home!
83 years have passed since the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States declaration of war, and the forced removal of Japanese Americans from the West Coast.
The first generation Issei and many of the second generation Nisei are gone.
Your parents struggled fiercely to build their life's work under the stigma of immigrant. Now I am 70, arriving after many trials. I have buried my wife in Japan, survived the war, all sad things lived through. My children remember.
The war years had complex and profound effects on Japanese Americans, uprooting our communities and causing severe psychological and emotional damage.
The camps that held us captive in our own country have been reclaimed by the desert and swamplands on which they were built.
Families make pilgrimages to remember the camp experience, to keep it alive for their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren.
A 6.25-ton granite marker sits high on a windy hilltop overlooking the former site of the Santa Fe internment camp.
The unimaginable happened to us in 1942. A mass evacuation disguised as national security. We must safeguard our rights so it never happens to another minority group.
I swore it would not devour me.
I swore it would not humble me.
I swore it would not break me.
The silence is broken. The silence is broken.
Issei and Nisei voices have been heard.
Sansei, Yonsei, Gosei, voices are loud and clear.
The seeds I planted sprout and grow even in this very old body. Joy overflows.
The bitter ordeals I have suffered, one after another, now without sorrow, I am filled with grace.
Now that the testing of the pioneer is over, the door to the moon is open. Ah, the human spirit, it is limitless.
And yet it did not devour me.
And yet it did not humble me.
And yet did not break me.
So we're going to take about a 10-minute break. So feel free to explore the exhibit, use the restroom, get some more refreshments in the back, and then we'll come back and we'll do a Q&A discussion with the New Mexico JACL and Nikki Lewis. So have your questions ready, and yeah, be back in 10 minutes.
And Nathan, may I have just one moment here? We have something for our incredible playwright here. Nikki, thank you for that.
Arigato. And we're going to circulate, so any questions you have about the panels? The person responsible for the panel is Victor Yamada.